One of the greatest things about Destiny is the opportunity to travel to different locations in our solar system. We can visit the windswept deserts of Mars, the volcanoes of Venus, and the silver plains of our moon. With the release of The Taken King, we are taken, get it? Taken, like the enemy. Anyways, we are taken to a new destination, the absolutely stunning Rings of Saturn. We've already studied Mars and Venus and seen how accurate they were represented in Destiny, and now we have an opportunity to study the jewel of our solar system. Let's get to work. So on clear nights and opportune times, we can look to the sky and see the planet Saturn way far off in the distance. But of course, it only appears as a little dot in the sky. To be able to observe the planet and its famous rings, we need a telescope. So let's take a look and... whoa, that is a thing of beauty. Of course, seeing the planet is awesome, but look at those rings. It's utterly magnificent. The first astronomer to see Saturn's rings was Galileo, but his telescope wasn't strong enough to discern the rings. Through Galileo's telescope, Saturn looked to have two orbs beside it. Galileo gave a humorous description of the planet as having ears. It wasn't until 1655 that Christopher Huygens discovered that those ears were rings that orbited around the planet. Early astronomers initially thought that these rings were solid, but we now know that the rings are not solid, but instead are composed of innumerable tiny particles that all orbit Saturn independently. There are many parts to the rings, but there are three main rings that orbit Saturn, which are the A ring, the B ring, and the C ring, and they maintain a perfect shape around the planet. Now, when we travel to the location in Destiny, there is a menacing ship lurking in these rings. We of course know this as the Dreadnought, Oryx's dark fortress, which is also in orbit around Saturn, residing in its rings. As we approach the ship and the planet, the Dreadnought appears to be between some of Saturn's inner rings, specifically the B and the C rings. That would put it somewhere around 40,000 kilometers from Saturn. Sounds like it's pretty far away, right? Yet when we look out from the Dreadnought, the gas giant fills the entire screen. Is it supposed to be that big? I know it's a gas giant, but still, 40,000 kilometers is pretty far away. Well, we can use its size in our view, called the angular diameter, to help us find the distance to the planet using a variation of the angular diameter formula. We'll start with Saturn's diameter in kilometers, which is 116,464 kilometers, and multiply that by 57.3, which gives us an amount of 6,673,387 kilometers. We then take that number and divide it by Saturn's angular diameter, which, since it fills our entire view, is at least 180 degrees, which is what we'll use for the equation, giving us a final answer of 37,074 kilometers away, which is actually pretty close to the location of where the ship appears to be in-game. It's pretty cool. However, not everything we see from the hull of the Dreadnought is completely correct. Since the ship resides within the rings of Saturn, we get a unique perspective of Saturn's rings, the inside. The view is quite stunning and actually quite peaceful. The icy rocks silently drift by as what's left of the awoken fleet burns away to join the rest of the rubble of the rings. The light of the sun shines through the debris, revealing the gas giant's beauty as storms rage underneath its clouds. It's always nice to come here, sit down, and just think about the adventures we've had since the start of Destiny. Now inside the real rings of Saturn, there is cacophonous mayhem as boulders the size of houses smash into each other to compete for a place in the rings. These boulders destroy each other and become smaller and smaller, getting as small as a grain of sand. All of these particles are also whipping around Saturn at insane speeds, but each ring actually revolves around the planet at different speeds. The closer a ring is to Saturn, the faster it revolves. The inner edge of the C ring, or the ring closest to Saturn, revolves at around 23 kilometers per second, while the outer edge of the A ring, or the ring furthest from Saturn or closest to the Sun, revolves at about 16 kilometers per second. Now, we've already established that the Dreadnought is around 37,000 kilometers away from Saturn, in between the B and C rings, which puts it at a speed of about 23 kilometers per second. So when we look out towards Saturn from the hull of the Dreadnought, the ring particles don't seem to be moving because they are traveling about as fast as we are. But when we look out to the Sun or out to space, we should be zipping by the particles further out, since we are moving much faster. But all the particles just kind of float there. Not completely correct, but I don't think this was an oversight by Bungie. I can't imagine the kind of nightmare it would be to try to give every single one of these rocks a flight path in the sky. But just because the rings aren't completely correct doesn't mean the rest of the skybox isn't. We've already established that Saturn would appear that large in the sky if we were on the Dreadnought. But what about some of the other features of the planet? Well, we can't really see into the inside of Saturn because it's permanently covered in clouds. It's a gas giant. Now, these clouds are whipped around the planet by the insane wind speeds Saturn can generate. All of these clouds moving against each other can create tremendous lightning storms, some of which can span the entire planet. Saturn also has numerous moons, although most of them are not very large. Only 13 have diameters over 50 kilometers. Some of these moons include Titan, which is the only moon in the solar system with an atmosphere, Mimas, which looks suspiciously like the Death Star, and my favorite, Enceladus, which shoots geysers of liquid water out into space. Sadly, none of these moons make an appearance in-game, but when flying to Saturn, we can briefly see round objects in the sky, which may well be some of the smaller moons of Saturn. Some of the larger moons of Saturn, like Titan and Enceladus, are theorized to possibly have life, which is an exciting prospect for us here on Earth. The Hive themselves are descendants from a species that lived on a planet like Saturn, although their gas giant was named Fundament. The Proto-Hive lived on a floating continent on the liquid helium ocean under the clouds of their planet. Maybe Saturn has something similar hiding under its electricity-laced clouds. How thrilling would it be to travel to a floating continent inside of Saturn? Maybe we've got a destination like that sometime in the future. After all, the 9 have yet to reveal themselves to us. Thank you for watching, and see you later.
The world will need a new common tongue, a language of newness.
Hold on, what did he just say?
A language of newness.